They will be thinking about it, and they will be producing theories and views about death and life. This is the most immediate things to every human being, life and death, and therefore no wonder that in the past and in future we encounter, these different views and opinions about death. I would say the present age, the present time, is the time in which the ideas of life and death are the emptiest. You see, people really look at death as something which is absolutely irrelevant to human beings, as if it is something accidental, something which we have to abhor it, and something which is an evil, you see, but a necessary evil, which is inevitable. So this is really the view or the idea or the conception that we have got from death nowadays. And that was not the case in the past, as you mentioned. And not only the religious societies, but the irreligious ones. Those who did not have a so-called heavenly religions. No people in the past actually viewed death like this, so empty, so senseless, so irrelevant, you see. For them it was full of sense, and as I said, especially they took and they tried to approach life through the idea of death. Of course there are philosophies in the modern times, especially the existentialist philosophy. For them also the idea of death is very central, very central. Their philosophy is existentialism, but in order to understand the existence, actually they start with the idea of non-existence, of death. And that actually gives them a better way in order to understand the idea of existence and life and so on and so forth. Because among all beings, it is only human beings who die and who know that they die. You see, this is our main, basic, exceptional characteristic. Other animals, they die, but they do not have any conception of death. You see, they just, flee from dangers. Okay, but the idea of death, the perception of death, the conception of death is not there with them. It is only with human beings who die and who know they die and who theorize about the death and who try to make sense of it. And even, as I said, sometimes in some philosophy they try to define life on the basis of death. So as you say, in the modern age, in the industrial civilization, if you like, yes, selfhood and even I would say selfishness now is at the core. Everything revolves around the self. Okay, therefore the idea of selflessness is very irrelevant, senseless to the people living at this age, mostly. And it is very interesting to see. Rumi says that it was prophets who actually brought us the idea of death and made us mindful of death. This is very important. It is, he says, in the core of the religion, which is death conscious. A death conscious school. That is, according to him, one of the main functions of the prophethood and the prophets in the world. There is a dialogue between the people of a prophet and a prophet in Rumi, in the book 3. You have to read it for yourself. That is also a very important and significant dialogue, and of course all dialogues in Rumi is his. So actually he uses stories in order to tell his own story. So that's what he says in the beginning of the Masnavi, that I am actually telling my story. All other stories are coverage or a cover up, whatever you say. So here the story of the prophet and his people is exactly like this. The people, the addressee of the prophet, who were not actually prepared to accept the invitation or the call of the prophet, argued with him and against him. One of the arguments that the people brought against the prophet was this, that we were joyful people but now we have become death conscious because of you. This is exactly what Rumi actually wanted to say and wanted to tell us and wanted to sell us. That is his idea, and he doesn't use this and he doesn't mention this in negative sense. It is in positive sense. Yes, this is the business, this is the function of the prophets and the prophethood, to make us death conscious. Most of the joyfulness of the people in this world are shallow, are thin, are nothing, and death consciousness is one of the teachings of the prophets and religions. It is true. Therefore, no wonder that in a secular age and under a secular worldview, death, of course, becomes so marginalized and so irrelevant to the life that nobody cares, think about it and talk about it, and everybody tries to just repudiate it and refuse it and refuse to think about it, as if it is an evil that we better not to mind it, not to care about it. So this is, yes, I mean, this is one of the logical consequences of a secular age. No wonder. And according to Rumi, it was one of the basic teachings of the Prophet to make us death conscious. But I tell you that death consciousness is a precondition for life consciousness. People who are not mindful of death, they do not make sense of life at all. This is what he means. Sorry, a notion? No, I don't think so, because this might have been suggested by some, but really there is no evidence for this to be borne out. As far as we know, Rumi, of course, he was living in the neighborhood of Buddhists. Actually, there were Buddhists in the city that he lived in. Of course, I mean, he left when he was 12, so he was not, so to speak, contaminated or corrupted by these ideas. But nevertheless, I would say that the culture was there, and his surrounding was imbued with the idea, and definitely he knew something about the idea of incarnation and Buddhism and Hinduism and things like that, so he must have been familiar with these things. But there is no indication whatsoever in his writings, in his poetry, and neither in Matnavi nor in his divan, that even remotely relates to this idea of incarnation. Therefore, those people who have tried to offer a new interpretation of the verses we read here, they did it on the basis of the modern theory of evolution, rather than on the idea of incarnation. That was not in his mind. And there is actually global reason for that, I would say, and that is this: for Rumi, actually material life was nothing. He did not long for life to come to return to this world again. That did not actually rob his heart, so to speak. Therefore, it was not that emotional or that interesting to him. So he actually wanted, as I said, to dissolve the self in a self soul. This is that he uses sometimes words which even in Persian are very curious. We do not have it in, I don't think, in any language. We have got self, and then do we have self? Like good and better, but he uses the word self. He says the beloved is selfer than myself. He is more than an I and somebody who is, how do you say in English, somebody whose I-ness is loftier than mine. So that is how he uses the word in the expression in Persian. There also is very curious, but nevertheless, his idea of this kind of evolution is for the self to become united or become dissolved in a self soul, in a soul which is selfer than the self, is more of a self, if you like. So that is his idea. But coming back